This is great. But let me start by saying one more time, Patsy, thanks for all you've done for so long. We love you. Thank you. It is so good to be here with you. Texas has elected some fearless women, like Annie Blanton and Ann Richards, truly amazing women. And Annie's list is working hard to elect a new generation of progressive women leaders right here in the Lone Star State. Go get them. That's how I see it. Go get them. So thank you for inviting me to join this celebration, and thank you for giving me an excuse to come back to Austin. Now, I go way back in Austin. I mean, way, way back. When I was in grade school, I spent summers visiting my Aunt Alice and my Uncle Claude at their house on Bull Creek Road. I spent summer with my brothers when they were stationed at Bergstrom Air Force Base. Yeah. And shoot, I knew Austin back when nobody had to remind us to keep Austin weird. It just was weird. I did some real growing up in Texas. I finished college at the University of Houston. Go Cougars! Had my first job as a law professor at UH and then at UT, hook 'em horns. And this is the place where, as a young mother, I set out to try both career and family at a time when a lot of people said, it won't work, so don't even try. And this is the place where I started learning about leadership, about what it means to be a woman in leadership. Now, a lot of times we talk about the importance of women's leadership in terms of representation. And sure, representation matters. We are here to represent women, right? There's real value in shattering glass ceilings. There's real meaning in a little girl being able to see women in power. There's real progress we can make when we use that power to lift up people who don't have power for themselves. And I'm going to say something that I know is very controversial, so I hope all of you are sitting down. Kind of hold on to your neighbor. But I think when policy decisions are being made about things like women's health care, it would be nice to have some actual women in the room. Yeah. As many of us have said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. So yeah. Representation is a good and important thing. But I think that if we think about women's leadership in those terms only, then we're selling ourselves short. We're acting as if electing more women is something we should do for women. Well, I see it differently. Electing more women is something we should do for America. Over the last few months, we have begun a long overdue national conversation about sexual harassment and assault and the need for reform, and not just in Hollywood or on Capitol Hill, but on factory floors and in fast food restaurants. And now it's become something more than a conversation about the horror of abuse. It's also become a conversation about the way our workplaces operate and the way power is distributed in our country and the way we treat each other every single day. It is a vitally important conversation, and here's the thing. It started only because some brave women spoke up about the realities of their own lives. This conversation wouldn't be happening at all if women hadn't told their stories. Now, we may fundamentally change workplaces in America, and it all started with women sharing their own real-life experiences. So here's a question. What if the conversation we had about our economy were also rooted in real-life experiences? What do you think? And I want to give you an example that's been rattling around in my head lately. In Washington, the guys at the think tanks are all talking about how to increase productivity. In other words, how to make the whole country richer. And they churn out papers and they hold conferences, and they all tend to have the same answer. More machines, more robots, more computers, more equipment. That's how we will be a more productive country. So what's happened? Well, we've written all these provisions into our tax code to incentivize businesses to spend more money on machines. But I want to stop and take a look at the numbers. Yes, girls can do math. When women started entering the workforce in the 1970s, it led to a huge boost in productivity. Economists have studied this in all kinds of ways, but I'll pick just one stat from a McKinsey study from a few years ago. They found that were it not for the 38 million women who entered the workforce between 1970 and 2009, our economy today would be 25% smaller. Think about that, 25% smaller. But as we headed into the 21st century, the growth in women participating in the workforce peaked, and now the proportion of women is actually going down. And by the way, that is an American problem. In other countries, the rate of women's participation kept right on growing. Standard & Poor's estimates that if the U.S. had simply kept pace with countries like Norway in terms of women's participation in the workforce. You've heard of that place? If we'd simply kept pace with Norway, our economy today would be about $1.6 trillion bigger. That would be $5,000 more for every man, every woman, and every child in this country. Think about that. So here's an idea for all those guys at the think tanks. You want to increase productivity in the economy and produce better outcomes for all of America, you could keep giving tax breaks to companies to replace more workers with machines. Or you could figure out how to give women a better chance to contribute. Now, I know about economics, but today I want to speak not from a textbook, but from life. My life right back here in Texas. As it happens, I was one of those women who entered the workforce in the 1970s. And if anyone wants to thank me for the increase in GDP, I'll just come right down here afterwards, shake hands, do a few pictures. But I didn't set out to grow America's GDP. Nope. I got married at 19, dropped out of college, followed my husband to his job in Houston. I graduated from U of H and started teaching special needs kids. We got any school teachers in the house? Go school teachers. School teachers rock the future. But when I got pregnant, that was the end of that job. Those were the days. And maybe if it had been a generation earlier, or even a decade earlier, that actually might have been the end of it for me. But by then, a window had started to open for women like me, just a crack. And so I hatched a crazy plan to go to law school. I actually, as I was thinking this through, I actually laughed out loud when it hit me that someday my little daughter Amelia would be able to say that her mommy was a lawyer. Wow. So I'm nothing if not organized. So I took the exams, check. I filled out the application, check. I figured out how to swing the tuition, check. I had my trusty blue Volkswagen tuned up so it could make the commute, check. I had everything on my list figured out, just one last little thing I needed to take care of, childcare. My daughter Amelia was about to turn 2, and to go back to school, I needed daycare. But hey, how hard could that be? I found out just how hard it could be. I spent weeks visiting all kinds of places. You've been there. None of them were right. The kids looked miserable, there was a funny smell, the cost was way outside our budget. Finally, with less than a week before classes were starting, I found a place that seemed great. Cheerful teacher, nice play area, no funny smells. So, I'm getting ready. Just one problem. As I'm filling out the application, I see that they only take children who are dependably potty trained. I looked down at Amelia. She's not yet 2 years old. Couldn't let that stop me now. So I said, dependably potty trained, check. Yep. Now I had about 5 days to get that toddler dependably potty trained. So I just want to say, I stand before you today, courtesy of 3 bags of M&Ms and a cooperative toddler. But here's the thing, childcare never stopped being an issue. For me, like for so many working moms today, it was the weight I had to carry around with me every single day, and it never let up. Now, eventually, I graduated from law school. I was enormously pregnant, and that made me enormously unemployable. But eventually, after my son Alex was born, I got a job as a tenure-track baby law professor at the University of Houston. Go Cougs. Now, I loved teaching. I loved it. I knew that this, teaching, was what I was meant to do. So I did what it took to make it work. I taught Sunday school and made cookies for bake sales and got dinner on the table every night, even if most nights dinner was late and the kids were cranky. And a lot of you in here know this story. Washing dishes, bathing children, doing laundry at 11 o'clock at night, and then starting to prep for the next day, falling into bed somewhere in the early hours of the morning. It was hard, but I could do hard. It was exhausting, but I could do exhausting. The thing that eventually sank me, childcare. In the space of a few months, I had tried it all. Daycare, babysitter, sharing with a friend, home care, another daycare center. I still remember going to pick up the baby from the daycare center one afternoon. It was in this strip mall, and when I walked in to collect him, he was just sitting on this little cot. And his face was dirty, and his nose was crusty, and his diaper was soggy. And I tried to lay him down to change him, but he started wailing, and eventually I just gave up, and I thought I'll take him out to the car. And he just cried harder and louder and harder and louder. And he's kicking and he's screaming, and I'm trying to hold him. And there I was, standing in this parking lot, covered in tears and pee and baby snot. And I felt like a failure. No, I didn't feel like a failure. I was a failure. And a few weeks later, after I put the kids to bed and started another load of laundry, my 78-year-old Aunt Bee called long distance from Oklahoma just to see how I was doing. Fine, I said in a kind of high, thin voice. We talked a little bit, and then right in the middle of a sentence, I just burst into tears. It was too much. I had come to the end. And without even planning to say it, I told Aunt B that I was going to quit my job. I hadn't even thought of it until it just fell out of my mouth. I'm going to quit. But once I said it out loud, it was like something inside me broke, and I just cried harder and harder. Now, Aunt B, she didn't try to soothe me. She didn't tell me it was going to be all right. She just let me cry myself out, waited for me to blow my nose, get a drink of water, long distance. And then she said, I can't get there tomorrow, but I can come on Thursday. She showed up at the Houston airport 2 days later with 7 suitcases and a Pekingese named Buddy, and she stayed for 16 years. Now, if every working mom in the country had an Aunt B, we'd be cool. But think about that. I stand here today as someone who eventually wrote 11 books, got tenure at Harvard, built a consumer agency, and beat a popular Republican incumbent to take a seat in the United States Senate. Woohoo! Yeah, woohoo! Woohoo, and yet childcare nearly knocked me out. Childcare nearly sent me packing twice. Now, could I have gotten back in the game later after Amelia and Alex were old enough to go to school, or maybe once they hit high school? Maybe, but maybe not. And that's how I see this. Nearly 40 years later, we still have too many working moms who come to that critical moment and who don't have an Aunt B and who end up dropping out of the workforce or cutting short their education because they can't get past the exact same hurdle that almost tripped me up for good: childcare. Over the past generation, from 1970 through 2015, I want you to think about the economics of the American family. Wages have remained flat, but the costs of all kinds of basic expenses have gone up, up, up. Housing costs are up about 50%. Health insurance expenses have doubled, and the price of a college degree has more than tripled. It is tough out there, and families are feeling the squeeze. But the cost of childcare, it has gone up nearly 1,000%. 1,000% in nearly half of all states in this country. Childcare costs are higher than the cost of in-state public college tuition. That is a giant boulder that rumbles toward working women and that flattens so many families all across this country. And for single parents, and for parents working near the bottom of the income scale, and for parents trying to go back to school, the cost of child care often stretches families' paychecks far beyond the breaking point. Think about the consequences of skyrocketing child care costs. Today, 2/3 of mothers with young children have jobs. That's millions of mamas scrambling to make sure someone is taking care of the baby while they head off to work. And sure, dads worry too. But either way, a parent is worrying about whether they can scratch together enough childcare to be able to do their basic job. And let's not kid ourselves. More often than not, it's women whose career opportunities are limited when childcare is hard to find. It's women who get forced out of the workforce. It's women whose experiences paint the picture of what childcare crisis is really about: a crisis of lost productivity. So the policy conclusion is pretty simple. If we want to get serious about increasing productivity, we should make a bigger investment in affordable childcare. You think? We should support training for child care workers and pay a professional salary for doing this critically important work. And that takes me back to why we support women for public office. Okay, fun fact. Iceland had the world's first democratically elected female president. Nice. Want to know another fun fact about Iceland? The government spends more per child on childcare than any place in the world. Okay, there's Iceland. And how do other countries stack up on government spending on childcare? Well, after Iceland becomes Sweden, Denmark, France, and then about 30 other countries, including Bulgaria, Mexico, Estonia, before you get to the United States. Fun fact about the United States. Unlike Iceland and many of those other countries, the US has never elected a woman president. We need to fix that. In fact, it wasn't until we had a female nominee for President of the United States that someone even thought to run on a platform of universal child care. To borrow a phrase from that female nominee, Hillary Clinton, women's issues are economic issues and economic issues are women's issues. Can I have an amen on that? Amen. We have some great ideas about productivity, ideas about state-federal partnerships to get more money into childcare, ideas about how to make sure that childcare workers get paid enough money to support their own families, ideas about schedules that work, and the boldest idea of all, a commitment that every child, from baby to teenager, will have a safe, cheerful place to go while their parents are at work. Yeah. Now, whether you have small children or not, we all have an interest in the future of this country. And that means we have an interest in investing in America's children. This is how I see it. Until we decide, until all of us decide, men and women, married and single, black and white, old and young, that we are willing to invest more in our children, then we cannot build a country in which women have equal opportunity. So here's my pitch. Let's not elect more women just because we're sick of seeing photos of committee meetings where everyone's a white guy. Let's elect more women and diverse women because it gives us better chances to make the right decisions in government so we can build a better economy and a better country that works for everyone. And that's why I am so glad to be here today. Annie's List knows better than anyone that the work of getting women elected isn't easy, and that getting elected is just the beginning of the work. But one thing women definitely know is how to carry on no matter how tough it gets. You bet. What Mitch McConnell said applies to millions of women across this country. Nevertheless, she persisted. Women know what it's like to get harassed by their shift supervisor and hit on by their customers. Nevertheless, we persist. Women know what it's like to get 75 cents on the dollar for doing the same jobs as their male coworkers, and to have good ideas that they put forward, and then those ideas get scooped up by some man who later decides it was his idea. Nevertheless, we persist. Women know what it's like to get talked over in meetings, passed over for promotions, and screwed over in salary negotiations. Nevertheless, we persist. We persist. We persist and we march. We march in pink pussy hats. We march carrying handmade signs. We march with our moms and our sisters and our daughters. And last year, we marched in the largest single-day protest in the history of the entire world. Yes! You bet we did. Yeah. Oh, and here's the best part. When we go from marching to running, like 26,000 women have said they want to do this year, we know what we're signing up for. We know we're going to get attacked, not just for what we've done in our lives and what we want to do in office, but for how we dress, how we do our hair, and how we sound when we get angry. Nevertheless, we will persist. We will persist, and some of us will lose. And we'll have to give graceful speeches and politely concede to male opponents who never respected us. We'll have to listen to the pundits say, well, if she just sounded like that during the campaign. And we'll have to watch as men who lose will get talked up for other races while we'll be told to take up knitting. But nevertheless, we will persist. And even those of us who win, even when we succeed in storming the halls of power and claiming our rightful seat at the table, we'll encounter a system that's rigged against us and rigged against the people we ran to fight for. We'll face obstruction, we'll face gridlock. And if you think it's obnoxious when a man talks over you at a business meeting, wait till it happens in the United States Senate. Nevertheless, we will persist. We will persist because we understand from our own experiences how much is at stake in this fight. We will persist because for working moms across the country and for the Aunt Bees in their lives, failure has never been an option. We will persist because that's what women do. And that's why women candidates are not novelties. We are not symbols. We are not luxuries for Democrats to support when it's convenient or safe or easy. We are the fighters who know better than anyone that we must change the face of power in our economy, in our government, and in our country. We are the leaders that this moment demands. So yes, we will persist. We will keep marching. We will keep running. We will keep winning. We will keep leading. And we will do it together. Thank you, Annie's List. Thank you. We're going to do this. Yes.